Hello everybody, welcome to another Patreon video. We are going to continue our explorations into light and dark with these lessons that are derived from Johannes Itten's Design and Form, the Bauhaus basic course, or the basic course at the Bauhaus. I'm compressing some of his lessons on this particular section into, it's basically 3 micro lessons I'm compressing into one. And we're just going to go ahead and dive into it. The prompt, which will also be written at the bottom of this post, is to create 9 rectangles using 9 distinct tones. So using 9 distinct tones, create 9 rectangles. Now, if you remember to the previous lesson, we defined a white circle by surrounding it with a darker tone. Same concept here. The change of tone will define the shapes. So using 9 tones, you will create 9 rectangles. Each rectangle must touch at least one other rectangle. That's it. That's all the criteria. I would recommend starting to do 1 iteration of this prompt. Just go ahead and do 1. After you're done, stop. I have a time lapse of me doing 3 iterations of this prompt. After you've done at least 1, then I recommend you hit play again on the video, watch the time lapse, and then we'll discuss what I've done on the time lapse, and maybe you can compare that to what you've done at home. Hey everybody, we have the first page from those iterations I did on the time lapse. Let's start with the first one. It succeeds in the prompt in that we have 9 rectangles, each with a discrete tone. However, it fails because we have these boundary marks here. And I understand if everybody did that to give yourself a space and orientation and you just kind of fill in the tones. But remember from our first assignment, the shape is defined by the tones. In this one, the shape is defined by this dark tone surrounding the rectangle. So the tones aren't really defining the rectangle, or this tone here inside is not defining the rectangle. It's this darker tone here that's defining the rectangle. That makes these compressed dark areas basically the benchmark by which you judge all these other tones. So in that way, it's not fulfilling the prompt in a very effective manner. If we go to this second one, we have 9 discrete rectangles, each one touching one of the other, and each one is defined by a distinct tone. And if you have these 2 next to each other, this one reads almost like a schematic. You know that it's supposed to show you different tones and that they're supposed to go this way. This is a little more open. We have some more interesting moments like here and here. Here and here has something going on. And actually the way the marks between these 2, this looks like it's kind of getting pinched, which will bring me to our third iteration, in which we have 9, well in this case 12, I went a little overboard, but we have rectangles, each has a distinct tone, and each rectangle is touching at least one other rectangle. Now what happens here is because we've varied the ratios, we have this idea of compression. Like if I look at this area versus this area, the tones, both are very light tones, but they just feel different. This feels like it's getting squeezed, and then that compresses it in this direction, but when we focus on it, it seems like this is shooting up and down. So it adds a little bit this sense of motion or pressure. Same if we think about the difference between this tone and say this right here. This looks like it's kind of getting pressed between those 2 lighter tones. So we're able to introduce some different ideas about texture, movement, and space just by altering the shape of whatever the shape as well as the tone. So I did one other iteration. Remember, you want to do 4 or 5 iterations of each one of these prompts. I did one more that I did not put on time lapse. And again, it fulfills the prompt of using distinct tones to create 9 rectangles, and each rectangle must touch at least one other rectangle. And we end up with something like this. Let me go ahead and turn it this way so we can get it all on there. I kind of like it. I think I like it that way. I think this way is better. Okay, sorry about that. So we have, if we count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 9 rectangles, each with a distinct tone. I have a much more interesting image, a little more dynamic. We have a little bit of movement, a little bounce between here, here, and here, which is nice. I did cheat a little bit on this one in that this tone, and this tone are actually not distinct. They're just the paper shining through. I've left those areas blank, but I could easily come and alter the tone. But look what happens. Even if I came in and tried to darken this a little bit, I would have to darken this, I would have to darken this, and I would have to darken this. So a lot of times tonal differences are also relative depending on what they're surrounded by. And speaking of surrounded, we can see that each one of these rectangles is defined by the change in tone on its outside and on its inside. So that's something to bear in mind. This is also related to our first exercise, in which I can't say this enough. These shapes and these lines are only defined by the change in tone. Now, that brings us to a preview of what the next assignment or what the next lesson is going to be. Where with these, they've kind of read a little formulaic, like, draw rectangles, define these circles. We're actually going to take these tools that we've been working on in these first 2 lessons and put them towards actually constructing an image. So I look forward to seeing what all your all's tonals, tripped over words. I look forward to seeing what all tonal exercises you all come up with, how you orient your rectangles, what kind of tonal steps you create. And I will be posting some previews of the next assignment shortly after this one, so keep an eye out for that, and I look forward to us working together on the 3rd assignment.